Good morning and buenos dias, and welcome to the Literacy Breakfast with Nancy Pearl, one of the biggest fundraisers we hold here at the Whatcom Literacy Council. I am Catherine Fryman, Executive Director of the Whatcom Literacy Council, and all of the proceeds of today's event go to our free adult literacy services here in Whatcom County. Yes, the breakfast is virtual, but the program is wonderful, and we thank you for joining us this morning. I would like to thank Axiom Division 7, a local roofing and construction company, for their support as our major sponsor, and to BP Cherry Point Refinery, Barron Smith Doggart, and Brett McCandless Brown and Connor, and Mayberry Farm for their ongoing support of our services. And a shout out to Paul, Kelly, and Sarah at Village Books for partnering with us on this event, and a special shout out to Claire McElroy Chesson, the events coordinator at Village Books, for all of her help this morning as stage manager. We'd like to start our program with opening remarks from someone who reminds us about the importance of literacy, someone who recognizes that literacy is a platform for equity and a pillar of democracy. Today, we're lucky to have Paqui Paredes Mendez, the Dean of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at Western Washington University, here to join us. Dr. Paredes is a native of Galicia, Spain, and her research focuses on early 20th century Spanish literature and cultural studies. Many of her publications focus on the intersection between national identity and gender identity, particularly on how nation and gender are encoded in visual culture. We're happy to have you all with us this morning, and we're happy to have you with us, Dr. Paredes.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias, and welcome to the 2020 Literacy Breakfast. Bienvenidos. My name, as Catherine said, is Paqui Paredes. I'm the Dean of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at Western Washington University, where my home department is the Department of Modern and Classical Languages. I taught Spanish language, literature, and culture there for 16 years before moving into the Dean position. And I very much miss and cherish the time that I spent in the classroom. It's really a great honor for me to be speaking at this event today, particularly given how close and dear to my heart the mission of the Whatcom Literacy Council is. After Catherine sent me an email to invite me to participate in this event, I went to the council's website and read its motto, Whatcom Literacy Council, opening doors, changing lives. And I was struck by how accurately and vividly captures the power of literacy and generally the power of language. It also deeply resonated with me because it very much captures my own story and the doors that literacy in a variety of languages opened for me, doors that have repeatedly changed my life to finally bring me here and with you today. My life story has always been shaped by my relationship with languages and with an increased sense of control over my own destiny as I acquired more languages and particularly literacy in those languages. I grew up in Galicia, the region of Spain that sits right above Portugal. My first language was Gallego, which is very closely related to Portuguese, and many consider it, in fact, a dialect of Portuguese. My parents were from a tiny rural village outside of a less tiny village. We moved to the less tiny village when I was 2. My family were small plot farmers. My dad was a welder and worked for a small factory that manufactured agricultural equipment. And my mom took care of the house, the kids, and worked in the fields. All of my family spoke Gallego fluently. They all understood Spanish to a basic level, but did not speak it. Neither my parents nor my grandparents could read or write in Gallego. My grandparents never went to school, so they could not write or read Spanish either. My parents finished primary school, and since the education system was purely in Spanish, they have basic reading and writing skills in Spanish, although they can't really understand more technical or complex texts. They call my brothers and I when they receive paperwork from the bank or the doctor, just to make sure they understand things correctly, or to make sure that they are not missing anything important. To them, the fact that we can understand pretty much anything in print is like having a superpower. This is the context in which I grew up, and the only difference between my life and my brother's lives and the lives my parents and grandparents had is the power of education, and above all, the power of literacy. I was lucky to enjoy the huge benefits of a strong public education system, which improved enormously in Spain after the Franco dictatorship. When I started kindergarten, I learned to speak, write, and read in Spanish. The most exciting thing about learning to read and write was that all of a sudden I had access to books. And with books came stories. And with stories came possibilities and dreams, and getting to know things and people that were kind of inconceivable in the reality that I inhabited. That same process of discovery and self-discovery was reignited every time I learned a new language, which opened new doors and new possibilities. It was through opening those doors and those possibilities that I find myself here. My life would not have been possible without the possibilities and potential that literacy brought along. It is the gift of possibility and fully tapping into one's potential that the Whatcom Literacy Council brings to all the families and individuals that use their services. And for that, we cannot ever thank them enough.
Thank you, Packy. You have quite an interesting story, and we truly appreciate you being here this morning. Next, I'd like to introduce someone who volunteers with the Whatcom Literacy Council, Mindy Peters-Virgin. Mindy works for Wells Fargo and is a mother who lives up in the small town of Blaine, which is on the Canadian border. She teaches an English class for parents at the local elementary school. We love working with local school districts where we hold classes for parents, not only because it gives the parents an opportunity to learn, but statistics show that when parents are engaged, their children do better academically and socially. It's a win-win situation. Thank you for being here this morning, Mindy.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mindy Peters-Virgin, and I am a volunteer with the Whatcom Literacy Council. I lead a small group of adult English language learners in Blaine. My class is extremely diverse, and for many of my students, English is actually their third language, not just their second. From Guatemala to Iran and Kazakhstan to Mexico, we have learned from each other, shared our favorite foods and customs, and found surprising similarities and built community. Did you know that the word for library is the same in Russian and Spanish? Can you imagine trying to learn English when you're still learning the Latin alphabet? I am always up for a good challenge, but my students give me a run for my money weekly, and I have loved every minute of it. I could go on for hours. However, in the short time I'm privileged to share with you this morning, my takeaway for you is this. My great-grandmother always said, "You reap what you sow in this great big world," which has proven to be true in every aspect of my life, and my time as a volunteer is no exception. I love my students and cannot wait until we can get back in the classroom again, empowering each other, laughing, learning the important rights that one has the privilege to exercise in this country. While we have mock teacher-student conferences, learn appropriate verb tenses, practice going to the doctor's office, and discuss the structure of the school board and why parent involvement is so important, little do they know that I reap much more than I am sowing from these individuals. I am so proud of each and every one of them, and their courage inspires me. I am blessed to know each of them and privileged to have them in my life. Literacy is social medicine. Consider being a part of the beautiful cure for what ails us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mindy. At the Whatcom Literacy Council, we train and support volunteers like Mindy to help us out with our one-to-one tutoring and our small group classes. This allows us to provide a customized experience for all of our adult learners and to serve a greater number of people. Here's another volunteer who's worked with us in a number of capacities, Amanda Riley, speaking here with the learner she's currently working with, Marta Mejia. So
we should be seeing them shortly.
Okay, here they come. Thank you. Good morning, Marta.
Good morning. Good morning. Hello, my name is Amanda Riley, and I would like to thank Catherine for inviting me to speak today and share my experience volunteering with the Whatcom Literacy Council. I have been a small class facilitator for a year and went virtual like educators across the United States this summer. With the support shown by the Whatcom Literacy staff, fellow volunteers, and the graciousness of my adult language learners, we have experienced success. Our learners have welcomed us and put their home life as a backdrop to their learning space. Navigating the delicate balance of children and family members, reliable access to the internet, work schedules, and a quiet place to study, I am genuinely thankful to my learners for rising to the challenge of virtual learning with me. Being a part of this organization, I have found confidence in myself that I did not know before. I have seen light bulb moments on my learners' faces appear as tiny screens across my computer. If we have been taught one thing through this pandemic, learning and education will find its way. This work is meaningful to me because learning a language is a vulnerable place to be. I instill in my learners that it is okay to make a mistake because it means they are learning. I want to be there during challenging and vulnerable times so I can rejoice alongside them in their achievements. I am pleased to have Marta Mejia with us today as a testament to the work being done within this organization. As a devoted mother and career woman, she has made time to continue her education and build her English skills. I have enjoyed working closely with Marta, and I look forward to the day when we can finally meet in person. Thank you again for being here, and I look forward to our future supporting the Whatcom Literacy Council together.
Good morning, my name is Marta Mejia. In 2001, I immigrated from El Salvador to Washington State. I've been a current resident of Whatcom County for 17 years. Before that, I lived on Whidbey Island. On Whidbey Island, I took English classes at the local community college. My desire for continuing my English education is because I want to improve my English skills for my daughter and my job. My daughter is a 13-year-old with special needs. She has autism. This journey with her has helped me a lot. 3 years ago, I started working at the Art of Whatcom County for a program called Padres a Padres, Parent to Parent. I support Latino families whose kids has special healthcare needs and disabilities. My career is focusing around helping them find resources and applying for services. I found the Whatcom Literacy Council as a resource to share with Latino families who inquire about English classes. This year, I decided to continue my English education as a refresh. I was pleased to see that the Whatcom Literacy Council offered citizenship classes. I chose to enroll in both the English class and citizenship class, and it was an excellent experience where I learned a lot. This past summer, I began working with Amanda, who helping me fill out citizenship application. I'm proud to share that I have submitted my application this past September, and I will continue to practice and learn about English American history, and while I wait for my interview. I will continue to register for classes through Whatcom Literacy Council to improve my reading, writing, and speak English skills. I recommend the Whatcom Literacy Council as an excellent resource to families in our community. I am happy to be one step closer to my goals, become a United States citizen, improve my English skills to be able to help Latino families better, and in the future, become a certified medical interpreter. I want to thank the Whatcom Literacy Council for the opportunity to improve my English skills and prepare for the citizenship process. I hope to see the Whatcom Literacy Council continue providing this vital resource to help our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda and Martha. We hope their voices give you a window on what we do here at the Whatcom Literacy Council. Not only do we have volunteers serve as tutors and teachers like Mindy and Amanda, but we also place volunteers in classes at Whatcom Community College and Bellingham Technical College so that their students are more successful. Despite all of the challenges we've seen in 2020, including the need to have staff work from home and requiring that we only offer online services because of the pandemic, we want you to know that we're still here and still providing the same effective, high quality literacy programs that we have run since 1983. With amazing staff and strong leadership from our board of directors, we run a tight ship with best practices for governance and financial oversight. We honor the goals of each learner and empower them to gain the skills that help them communicate with their children's teachers, get better jobs, and engage with their neighbors for a safer and healthier community. If you have not done so already, I hope you know that now you can make a donation to support our work. So coming up at the end here is a slide there. So there's a link at the bottom of your screen. You can purchase books, but there's also a way to make an online donation, or I'm going to pause just a minute because the last slide is the slide that shows this information. These are all wonderful pictures of our learners and our volunteers doing their work, having an impact on the community, bringing neighbors together. So you can send us a donation via Venmo. You can make a check out to the Whatcom Literacy Council and snail mail it to P.O. Box 1292, Bellingham, Washington, 98227. Or at any time, you can go to our website, www.whatcomliteracy.org, and go to our donation page to make a gift. Now more than ever, your contribution will help our free literacy services to adults who are motivated to learn. This year, we're raising funds to help make our online services more robust, paying for that pro Zoom account and other online resources that we know will help staff and volunteers teach more effectively. Your generous contribution today will help us stay open tomorrow. Thank you for your support. So now we have the person you've all been waiting for, Nancy Pearl. Nancy Pearl is a best-selling author, librarian, literary critic, and a former executive director of the Washington Center for the Book at the Seattle Public Library. Among her many honors are the 2011 Librarian of the Year Award from Library Journal and the 2011 Lifetime Achievement Award from the Pacific Northwest Booksellers Association. Nancy is the creator of the internationally recognized program If All Seattle Read the Same Book, and was the inspiration for the Archie McPhee Librarian Action Figure. We truly appreciate her ongoing support of the Whatcom Literacy Council. She joins us today to promote reading as one of the most beneficial and joyful experiences anyone can have. Good morning, Nancy.
Good morning, Catherine. It's great to be here. I wish we were all in person together in that big room and I could see all my old friends and the new friends I've made over the years through coming to Whatcom Literacy. I have to say this is one of the most specialist days in the year for me when I come to talk about the books that I've loved to the wonderful audience that you have. And Catherine, one of the reasons is that I learned so much from these breakfasts, and the three women who spoke before me, I was so moved by, well, four women, I was so moved by, and I actually wrote down a couple quotes. Literacy is the gift of possibility. I've never heard that said better. It's amazing. And then literacy is social medicine that can heal a fractured country and heal us. I just thought those were absolutely wonderful. And I want to thank you for continuing to invite me to come and for doing such wonderful, wonderful work with literacy. So let's begin my list of good books. And remember, these books are all available at your wonderful independent bookstore, Village Books. Okay. We could dispense with that slide. Okay. The first book I want to talk to you about today is called The Quiet Americans, 4 CIA Spies at the Dawn of the Cold War, a Tragedy in 3 Acts. As you can see, the author of this book is Scott Anderson. You might remember that he is the author of that wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book that I talked about several years ago called Lawrence in Arabia. I have to say, if you have not read Lawrence in Arabia, I would absolutely recommend it. Notice that the title of that book, Lawrence in Arabia, is slightly different than what you might think, because we're accustomed to saying Lawrence of Arabia. But that title, Lawrence in Arabia, gives a clue to what Scott Anderson does so well in his books, which is give you the surrounding context, not only the subject of the book, but what is going on in around them and what makes them so important. He does the same thing in this book, The Quiet Americans. The 4 CIA spies are men named Frank Wisner, Ed Lansdale, Michael Burke, and Peter Sichel. Now, I had only heard of one of those 3 when I started reading this book, and that was Ed Lansdale. And the reason that I was familiar with Ed Lansdale, and some of you might be as well, is that he was the basis for the main character in The Ugly American, that novel by Burdick and Lederer. He was the Ugly American was actually based on Ed Lansdale and his life and his beliefs and his actions in the CIA. The other 3 you grow to learn about, and they all had fascinating lives against the backdrop of the Cold War through the present. Michael Burke, in fact, one of those 3, was the president of the New York Yankees baseball team. I think that's just fascinating. Of course, the major players in the second half of the 20th century appear in this book. J. Edgar Hoover, Wild Bill Donovan, who really was the force behind beginning the CIA, and the great let's say interesting social scientist, historian, politician, George Kennan. So this is one of my, this would be a book to give to anybody who's interested in late 20th century history and political, the politics of the late 20th century. So let's move on to the next book. This is a collection of poetry by Jericho Brown, published by Copper Canyon Press, a local Washington, state of Washington, a press located in the state of Washington. It's called The Tradition. It just won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. And rather than tell you about this, I wanted to read a poem by Jericho Brown, a shortish poem called Hero. She never knew one of us from another, so my brothers and I grew up fighting over our mother's mind, like sun-colored suitors in a Greek myth. We were willing to do evil. We kept chocolate around our mouths. The last of her mother's lot, she cried at funerals, cried when she whipped me. She whipped me daily. I am most interested in people who declare gratitude for their childhood beatings. None of them took what my mother gave, waking us for school with sharp slaps to our bare thighs. That side of the family is darker. I should be grateful, so I will be. No one on earth knows how many abortions happened before a woman risked her freedom by giving that risk a name, by taking it to breast. I don't know why I am alive now, that I still cannot impress the woman who whipped me into being. I turned my mother into a grandmother. She thanks me by kissing my sons. Gratitude is black. Black as a hero returning from war to a country that banked on his death. Thank God, it can't get much darker than that. That's Jericho Brown. If you are a poetry, if you love poetry, this is somebody who I think you'll want to become familiar with. Amazing, amazing writer. And that poem, which appeared originally in the Paris Review, is just a great example of the kind of writer he is. So let's go on to our next book. Oh my. So, I feel like we're going from the very serious of Jericho Brown's poetry to something light and just so much fun to read. I'm sure, like many of you, I'm sure, have only been able to read, or I have been particularly drawn to books that this year, particularly since March, that have no sadness and nothing that is too heavy. And this book is an absolute delight. Brampton Wick is one of 6 books by a British writer named Elizabeth Fair. And it's published by a publishing company, a small British publishing company called Furrowed Middlebrow Press. And what they are doing is reissuing long out of print books, mainly by women, published between 1920 and 1960. And Brampton Wick is one of those books. It's the first one by Elizabeth Fair, and it's set in a small English village. And you really get a feel for the book from the cover. But what Elizabeth Fair has done is just give us these little snapshots of all of the different residents of that small village and how they interact. And of course, there's a little bit of romance. And here's a quote from this book, which will give you a sense, I think, of the lightness of the tone. She wondered how Lady Masters got her old parlor maid to carry the coffee right down the lawn. But of course, Lady Masters got things done simply by always having had them and by taking for granted that she always would have them. If you like the books of Barbara Pym, I think that you will enjoy the books by Elizabeth Fair. And I would begin with Brampton Wick. I read them in publication order. And this was the first one that I was introduced to, and I became an instant fan. So let's go to the next one. And this is another book of nonfiction. I just adored this book. It's, as you can see, Gods of the Upper Air by Charles King. The subtitle is How a Circle of Renegade Anthropologists Reinvented Race, Sex, and Gender in the 20th Century. Of course, you always have to be a little suspicious of subtitles. And, you know, sometimes I just wonder whether there are people at publishing houses who do nothing but fill in that space after the colon or the supposed colon in a nonfiction title. The Gods of the Upper Air, the renegade group of anthropologists, are people who really invented the part of anthropology that we know as cultural anthropology, looking at different cultures and how to understand them and how to think about them. And the people who were part of this circle of renegade anthropologists are really, you know, important names in American cultural and literary history. Zora Neale Hurston, Margaret Mead, Ruth Benedict, Ella Deloria. And they were all students of perhaps the most important person in that group, Franz Boas. They believed that you could not compare one culture to another in the sense of saying our culture is better than that culture, that each culture, that there's no one standard by to do this comparison, and that you have to understand each culture in terms of its whole way of life, its whole belief system. This is not, I have to say, this is not a scholarly book. This is a book that, as we used to say, is written for the interested adult reader, the interested, perhaps somebody who really wants to read more about Margaret Mead, which is what I wanted to do. Well, I wanted to read about all these people, but I had read a memoir or a biography of Margaret Mead called Blackberry Winter. And I have to say, really, you might want to go back to that as well. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. Okay, next one. I'm going to hurry up a little bit. Oh my goodness, look at this fabulous, fabulous cover. This is a novel by Hilary Leichter, I think is how she pronounces her name. It's a first novel, and to read this book, you really, really need a kind of willing suspension of disbelief. You cannot take anything particularly seriously when you're reading this book, or almost. So all that the unnamed narrator of this satirical first novel really wants is permanence. She wants, as she says, the steadiness. And what is that steadiness? That steadiness is a permanent job. It's a dream, though, that seems unlikely to happen. Her mother was a temp worker, and the chances are good or bad, depending on how you're going to use those words, that she'll be a temp worker too. And she reports into a business that sends her out to all of these jobs that she holds for, a few days, weeks, months, and then moves on to a new job. Now, as the book progresses, our main character reports for work at a series of increasingly bizarre workplaces. She's a window washer. She's a mail person. She has a gig on a pirate ship. And my favorite, perhaps, is the one where she reports for duty as a human barnacle. And as these different jobs, as we learn about these different jobs and the narrator's really desire for a permanent job, a ghost enters the scene who gives her advice. The pace of the novel speeds up and becomes even more surreally delectable. I loved this book. And one of the other things that I absolutely thought was so fun about this book is that since the main character is not living in her apartment because she's off doing these other this other work, she has, it seems, 18 different boyfriends, each with his own job. So there's the boyfriend who's the cook, there's the boyfriend who's the handyman, and we go through her relationship on the phone as we listen in on the phone conversations that she has with them. I just loved this book. I knew I would love it because one of my favorite writers wrote a blurb that's on the front cover, Kelly Link, who I would also recommend that you go and read if you love that kind of surreal fiction. So that's Temporary. Next. Oh, Susanna Moore's One Last Look is a historical novel. Susanna Moore, I loved her first novel, which was called My Old Sweetheart, which was very autobiographical. But in this one, she takes us back to India in the 1840s and takes us on this journey as England once again tries to subdue Afghanistan. I absolutely adored this book. It's beautifully written. If you're a fan of historical fiction, beautifully written historical fiction, this is a good book for you. Next. All the Way to the Tigers. Oh my, this is another wonderful book. So Mary Morris is a memoirist. She writes novels. She writes mainly travel memoirs. And in 2008, Mary Morris was badly injured in an ice skating accident. And it was unclear whether she would ever walk again. She was in this period of terrible recuperation that she was going through. She was lying on her couch one day reading Thomas Mann's Death in Venice. And it took a quote from that book to get her out of her funk. And here's the quote. He would go on a journey, not far, not all the way to the tigers. And what Mary Morris decided was that if she ever got better, if she ever was able to walk again, she was ever able to travel again, what she would do is go all the way to the tigers, that is, to India. Now, it seems to me, I am a big fan of travel memoirs, armchair travel books. And it seems to me that they offer several pleasures to the readers, sort of woven together in the whole book. There are, of course, the accounts in the book of what I saw. And Mary Morris took 3 separate trips to India to try to finally see a tiger in the wild. There are parts in the book, in these travel memoirs, always, I think, that talk about the author talking about how I came to understand myself better, how this journey into a foreign place really enriched the writer's life. And then there's a part in the book, always, I think, that we could understand as like what I learned about the world. And I think as readers, we get those 3 things as well. I felt like I learned so much about tigers in this book. First of all, I had no idea. I was one of those people who thought that there were tigers in Africa. Well, there are no tigers in Africa. They are only in India. I had no idea that all tigers, no matter what their sex is, are referred to as she. So Mary Morris's memoir really just is one of those books that enrich your life, although I have not been in any situation where I could sort of bring up tigers and what I've learned about tigers so far. But I'm hoping that once the pandemic is over, somebody will invite me over and I can impress them with all that I know about tigers. Okay, next book. Oh, The Cactus League. So The Cactus League is a first novel, and it's by a woman, as you can see, named Emily Nevins. I loved this book as well. Emily Nevins is the editor, a very young editor of the Paris Review, and you don't have to love baseball to enjoy this book. You don't even have to know anything about baseball to enjoy this book. But let me just tell you that during spring training, the baseball teams, part of them go to Florida, that's known as the Grapefruit League, and part of them do spring training in Arizona, that's the Cactus League. And baseball is the setting for this book. And Emily Nevins, who actually grew up in Seattle and is a huge, huge baseball fan herself, has written a character-driven novel about not necessarily not baseball players, but about the people who surround the baseball team. So let me explain. There are 9 chapters, of course, one for each inning, and each one is almost a separate story. Together, they make up this novel. But what Emily Nevins has done is portray just a vividly described diverse group of people associated with this professional baseball team, including 2 baseball players in 2 different situations. One is somebody who had Tommy John surgery on his throwing arm and is hoping that he will be able to make it back to the bigs, but it's unclear whether he will. But so she includes a few players, but also writes about the people, a person who is one of the concession stand workers, one of the owners of the team, the batting coach of the team who wonders if he's getting too old for the job, an agent for one of the players, and of course, the hangers-on who are there to find their life enlivened by their affairs with these young baseball players. So when you think about that, think about the character that Susan Sarandon played in Bull Durham, Annie Savoy, and you'll get an idea about those. Even the team's organist takes up one of the chapters. So really you're looking at, this is a book for people who love character-driven books. If you love baseball, it's a bonus, but you don't have to. Next book, please. Next slide. She Votes. I loved, this is a really great book for several reasons. One is that it would be a great holiday gift to give to teenage girls, I'm thinking. She Votes: How U.S. Women Won Suffrage and What Happened Next. This is a very lively, vibrant history of women's suffrage that goes into really a deep dive into women's suffrage that is very inclusive of all the different groups of women who came together, who remained apart, who did all they could to get the 19th Amendment passed that gave women the right to vote. This is an oversized book, and it has fabulous illustrations. You can see 100 women artists did the illustrations for this book. It's not a reference book. It's a book that you'll want to sit down and read. It's one of those books that you learn so much from, and you learn it in a way that is that you don't realize you're cramming these facts into your head. It's a fabulous book. Okay, next. Oh my goodness, look at this book. The Autobiography of Alice B. Toklas by Gertrude Stein, with illustrations by Mara Kalman. So this book was original. I'm just trying to find the quote I want to read you from this book. This is a book that was published in 1933, and I suspect many of you are familiar with this book. I don't think it's ever been out of print. I could be wrong about that, but this is an autobiography by Gertrude Stein, written in the tone of and the voice of her longtime lover, Alice B. Toklas. And it's their life together in literary and artistic Paris in the first half of the 20th century. And even though it was published, coming up to 100 years ago, in about another decade, this is a book that is as fascinatingly quirky now as it was when it was first published. There was no one of any literary, artistic, musical ambitions who came to Paris in the first half of the 20th century who didn't make their way to Alice and Gertrude's salon. And even though this is supposedly in the voice of Alice B. Toklas, it's Gertrude Stein's wonderfully quirky writing. Now, what makes this new edition so special is that the illustrations are done by a wonderful artist named Mara Kalman. And you might be familiar with some of her earlier books. And if you're not, gosh, run to the bookstore, get them from the library. They're so worth reading and looking at. But Mara Kalman's illustrations in this book have really captured the period and captured the people and captured Gertrude Stein's idiosyncratic writing and their lives together. Now you can see from this cover illustration, this is an illustration of Alice B. Toklas, who was known for her little mustache. And of course, there she is. Now I want to read a quote from here because to just remind you of what a fabulous, witty writer Gertrude Stein is. So in this part, she's talking about two visitors, a husband and wife, who have come to their house for lunch. And the husband had been fascinated with what he had read in manuscript of Gertrude Stein's book that she was working on at that time, The Making of Americans. So here's the quote. He did, however, plead for commas. Gertrude Stein said commas were unnecessary. The sense should be intrinsic and not have to be explained by commas, and otherwise commas were only a sign that one should pause and take breath, but one should know of oneself when one wanted to pause and take breath. However, as she liked this man very much and he had given her a delightful painting for a fan, she gave him 2 commas. It must, however, be added that on rereading the manuscript, she took the commas out. That's Gertrude Stein. I loved this book. Okay, next. Set My Heart to 5. Oh my goodness. There's 2 books that were published in September. Both just satisfied my need at that time for something light and something very escapist. This is one of those 2 books. Set My Heart to 5 is the story of a bot, an android. It's set in a few years in the future. Through various mistakes, the internet has fallen into disuse. We would not be able to do this virtual breakfast today. And bots, androids, have been developed to take jobs that humans really don't want to do. And the jobs that they are taking are jobs that perhaps need that don't need any emotion, because the difference between an android and a human is that an android has no emotions. So our hero, Jared, is a bot, an android. Now, you know, when you're a dentist, you have to hurt people to help them. It would be very difficult if you felt so bad about hurting somebody that you then said, oh, I just can't work on that tooth because I know it hurts you so much when I'm drilling it or whatever. So Jared is a dentist, but then he discovers that he discovers this by watching old movies from the 1980s. The first one is Love Story, that he does have emotions, that he can feel pain in people's feelings. And he decides that what he wants to do is go to Hollywood and write a movie script that will convince people that bots have feelings too. I just interviewed Simon Stevenson for my TV show, so pretty soon you can watch that interview. And we had a really interesting discussion at the end about whether describing this book as heartwarming is a way that he would want it to be described. I am not fond of the word heartwarming as an adjective for describing books because it brings to my mind the word sappy. But this is a book that is heartwarming and not sappy. Okay, next book. We got to go really fast. Oh, Hench. This is the other book in September that I absolutely, absolutely loved. This is a first novel. You know that superheroes have sidekicks, right? Superman, Batman, and Robin. But bad guys, criminals, they don't have sidekicks. What do they have? They have henchmen, hench people. And this is the story of, this is another book, again, like the few others on the list, that needs a willing suspension of disbelief. The main character in this book is a hench. She's a henchwoman. Her name is Anna, and she is working for the worst criminal on earth. And Anna is not somebody who's good with guns. She's not somebody who is really tough and can beat people up. No, what Anna's big talent is, what she's super at doing, is manipulating big data via spreadsheets. I mean, she is fabulous on spreadsheets. And what she learns as a result of one spreadsheet that she has compiled is that superheroes can save people, yes, but in their wake, they leave lots of destruction. And if you do a cost-benefit analysis of, say, Superman's heroics versus the mess that he leaves behind, you'll see that maybe Superman is not the person that we should be indebted to. So Anna and her very bad criminal boss decide they're going to go after the greatest superhero in their world, and they do. When I read this book, I thought this was so much fun, and it was the kind of book that when I talked to Natalie Walshutz, I said, I can't wait until there's a sequel, because Anna's such a great character. And as somebody who cannot even do spreadsheets at all, I'm like in awe of her talents. And I think we have one more book. Oh, no. Is that the last slide? Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Nancy. What a lovely collection of books. That was amazing. Thank you so much for being here this morning and supporting the Whatcom Literacy Council. People should note that all of the titles that Nancy has recommended are available through Village Books on their, there's a button at the bottom, you can purchase the books right here, or you can just go to their website and buy every single title she's recommended. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your support of the Whatcom Literacy Council, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thanks. So thanks everyone for joining us this morning. I hope you enjoyed the program as much as I did. If you have not done so already, we hope you will make a gift today, either through the link button, or you could go to our webpage or the Venmo address, or you can send us a check through the snail mail. All the proceeds of today's event will go to our adult literacy programs, supporting learners like Marta and the work of volunteers like Mindy and Amanda. And so we really appreciate everything that you can do for us. Your gift today will keep us open tomorrow. And just a note, if you are a trivia buff, don't forget to register for our Trivia Bee coming up on Saturday, November 14th. That's our next big event. And if you like Jeopardy, and Ken Jennings will be there, and Scotty Van Driver, it'll be a lot of fun. So thank you to Village Books for partnering with us on this event, and a special shout out to Claire McElroy-Chesson for all her good work as stage manager this morning, figuring out the slides, bringing us up one by one. It was just a pleasure to work with her, and thank you for supporting the Whatcom Literacy Council. We hope you all have a good day, and que tengan un buen día.